Hello and welcome to the Clear Crypto podcast, brought to you by Starkware and Cointelegraph. No jargon, no hype, just straight talk on what crypto and blockchain do today and what they'll do tomorrow. Clear and crypto, if those two words sound like a contradiction in terms, you're in the right place. Maybe you're getting started in this world, we will get you up to speed. And if you are already an expert, if this is all really familiar with you, stay with us, because also what we're doing here is sharpening our ability to talk to everyone and anyone all about this. And at the end of the day, that is one of the key challenges of crypto if we're to attain widespread adoption. I'm Nathan, a journalist who's fallen into blockchain. In previous episodes, we've been talking about what blockchain is, what blockchain does, what you can do with it today. And today we're going to be taking some steps into the future to talk about what is colloquially known as Bitcoin Season 2. And we're going to be talking all about that with Isabel Foxen Duke, who is one of the great experts on this topic. But first of all, our dear friend Gareth, managing editor of Cointelegraph. How are you doing?
How's it, Nathan? I'm very well. Looking forward to another in-depth conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually been thinking about the previous episodes and the takeaways that we have from them, which hopefully our listeners and viewers are storing up in their chest of crypto wisdom to share with all their friends. One of them, I think, is that a lot of us have spent a lot of time walking around saying, hey, crypto is really great, it's really beautiful, but it's a hassle. And I think we've actually been challenging, and our guests have been challenging that assumption, saying, actually, sometimes it can be as intuitive, more intuitive, and it's definitely getting there. And another takeaway that you've spoken a lot about is Bitcoin's protocol and monetary policy, that they have a certain stability to them, far from what a lot of people think, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think everything kind of stemmed from Bitcoin and what it brought to the table. The protocol itself has fantastic sort of monetary policy, and that's very much part of the value proposition. Obviously, a lot of people say that Bitcoin is pretty volatile, but of course, it's still going through price discovery. It's not even more than 15 years old, So you need to remember these things when you're thinking about the price or value of Bitcoin. But if you understand the underlying protocol, then you begin to understand that it is hard money, it's finite, and these are the really important things that you need to focus on. And the rest of the innovations that the cryptocurrency industry have brought on build upon that in a myriad of different ways.
Absolutely. And today we're going to be talking about this really interesting phrase, Bitcoin Season 2. Delighted to welcome our guest, Isabel. How are you, Isabel?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. This is also one of my favorite terms in this industry. So yeah, let's dive into it.
Absolutely. So we'll hear a little bit about you in a few moments. But let's actually do as you say and dive into it. Can you explain to us in 45 seconds, what does the phrase Bitcoin Season 2 mean?
Bitcoin Season 2 is really about seeing what we can do with Bitcoin outside of just being money, right? What are the broad range of financial use cases for this money other than just being money by itself, right? So things like lending, scaling, faster transactions, cheaper transactions, all sorts of decentralized use cases. And again, I think the big one that a lot of folks are talking about right now, including things like runes, the creation of Bitcoin native assets. So meaning, can you create digital assets on Bitcoin other than Bitcoin, just the bare base asset itself?
And Isabel, if I give you a magic wand, you can wave that and Bitcoin will suddenly do anything that you would like it to do. What should it be doing that it isn't doing yet?
So what I'm most excited about right now is trustless bridging, the idea that you could trustlessly connect the underlying base asset of Bitcoin, the underlying monetary policy that Gareth mentioned that's so powerful, to outside computation of any kind so that you can do basically anything with your money in a trustless way. One of the most important properties of Bitcoin, one of the things that makes it hard money, is the fact that it is trustless. You do not need to trust banks, governments, third-party intermediaries to use it. So if you could use Bitcoin not just as a money, but as a base asset that can trustlessly plug into any financial system, that would be, in my opinion, kind of like the end of the road for this asset.
That's really cool. So Gareth, let's unpack that a little bit. What Isabel has said in a sense is, I'm excited about taking Bitcoin outside of its bubble and being able to basically key it in and connect it to financial systems all around the world. Can you explain the term bridging here? And can you also explain the term trustlessness?
Yeah, I guess trustlessness refers to the kind of systems that would take the underlying asset to a broader network of users. And that typically relies on, a peer-to-peer network, i.e. me and you transacting or sharing information or value with each other without an intermediary being involved at all.
Because you don't have this trusted intermediary in the middle, you don't have the Visa, you don't have the MasterCard, you don't have your bank. It's trustless. You're running it yourself, DIY, and nobody can get in the way. That's why it's trustless, right?
Yeah, so bridging that across to either other protocols or other parts of a connected group of systems is pretty difficult to do because Bitcoin, the protocol itself, is fairly limited in what the protocol allows you to do, right? It's a fantastic store of value and a peer-to-peer network within which we can transact with each other. It doesn't quite have the functionalities that other systems have, other new age blockchains and traditional financial systems. That is, of course, by design. And we've had a handful of fantastic innovations over the years, the Lightning Network, but they're still fairly limited by what you can do. If we can wave that magic wand and do a few more things, you can tap into the security and the trustlessness of the Bitcoin network, but do far more financially related things or, creative things. And I'm of the belief that you need to kind of have an open mind and experiment and play around with the protocol if we're going to figure out different use cases.
And this discussion actually brings us nicely to your background, Isabel, because you don't come from a crypto background through your whole career. You actually had a much more conventional career. And we love meeting people like this. We enjoyed meeting Chad from Argent, who had that TradFi career. So tell us what you were doing and how you come to be doing the whole crypto scene.
So I very, very briefly worked in traditional finance right out of college, many eons ago. And then I actually left to go start my own business in sort of the internet online wellness world. I wanted to do something entrepreneurial. I wanted to kind of be in control of my time and my life. And ran my own online business for several years, was really successful in that business venture. But something I noticed was that I couldn't figure out how to get on the property ladder. I couldn't figure out how to kind of accumulate wealth. By the time I was in my mid-30s, I was thinking, how am I going to eventually get to retirement one day, right? I'm not having a lot of success saving my money in a significant way, despite being very successful relative to my peers and making, high income relative to my peers. And once you start to kind of ask that question, go down that rabbit hole, you start to realize, the value of dollars decreases over time. As such, you kind of have to take on this risk of investing in things like equities and real estate in order to really survive at a certain point. Bitcoin kind of fixes this problem. Bitcoin is designed, as you guys have mentioned before, specifically to not be inflated, meaning the value of your Bitcoin basically stays relative, or in some instances outperforms the value of goods and services over time. It's the opposite of inflationary money in many ways. I kind of got hooked on Bitcoin and I realized that this was sort of the answer to potentially retiring one day. And now I teach other people about money and investing and what makes good money.
Okay, so Gareth, if we go along with the vision that Isabel is talking about, what will be the news stories that you're running on a site like yours on Cointelegraph in 2, 3, 4 years? What will be the Bitcoin stories then? What will Bitcoin be used for on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think the future of Bitcoin will be bringing real-world asset tokenization using protocols like Liquid. But again, these come down to fundamental questions that a lot of Bitcoiners don't like, bridging assets, locking up your Bitcoin and getting another asset in exchange for that, and finding self-custodial ways are the most important solutions that we need to solve in order to get most Bitcoin maximalists on board with this, knowing that everything is natively happening on Bitcoin but bringing scale and capacity to the network. I think those are the kind of stories we'll be telling in 2 to 5 years' time, and hopefully really great success stories that have a lot less fluff, but all of it happening within the Bitcoin ecosystem in a native way.
Yeah, I mean, that will be a very interesting vision to look back on. And when Gareth talks about self-custodial, he's talking about the way of handling crypto that doesn't involve the middleman. If you've not heard the episode on that concept with Chad West from Argent, it's worth looking that up. Isabel, when people say Bitcoin is great, but it's dumb, which sounds kind of quite insulting, can you just unpack for us what people are actually saying when they say that? Because I think that's going to take us on very nicely to some of the changes that you foresee.
Yeah, so there's a few key things that people are usually referring to when they make that statement. Number one sort of harkens back on this trustless bridging concept that I referenced earlier, which is that Bitcoin cannot see outside of itself. It is a very insular network, which is why this trustless bridging concept may become important, is that trustless bridging would theoretically enable Bitcoin to be able to verify information outside of just the monetary ledger information of its own data. The other thing that people often talk about or mean when they say Bitcoin is dumb is that Bitcoin has a very, very limited scripting language, right? So if you think about Bitcoin, literally can't even do multiplication. Bitcoin can only do very, very, very specific functions, computer functions that are chosen very narrowly in order to make it function as a monetary network, but basically nothing else. And so another way that we could potentially expand functionality for Bitcoin is to expand the scripting language to include more functions, so you could do more within the network itself as well.
As I've said before, I work at Starkware, and one of the things that Starkware is doing is actually talking a lot about this opcat, this change to the script of Bitcoin that would allow all sorts of things to be built on top of Bitcoin, not just moving money, but doing other things, maybe even social media, data, all these other functions. And Eli Ben-Sasson, the CEO who we've had on the show, actually likes to say that these script changes that will get us there, these script changes that will make Bitcoin so much more usable, have so much more utility, it's like installing another button on a calculator. So it's interesting, Isabel, that you come up with that calculator analogy. Gareth, the type of direction that Isabel's taking us in, these things are realistic in your assessment?
I think they're definitely realistic. I know Ellie was kind of not adamant, but really believes that in order to unlock a lot of this sort of smart contract functionality, increased programmability is probably the best way to explain it in layman's terms. You need to have Bitcoin improvement proposals like Opcat being accepted by the wider network so that you can do more on Bitcoin. It has its limitations by design, and that is because of its scripting language. But I do think that doing a lot of these things is not far-fetched at this stage, and it's already happening, like I mentioned. So I definitely think it's all possible, Nathan. And luckily, there's a lot smarter people than me out there that are trying to figure it out.
Now, as someone said to me, being able to explain this stuff is sometimes just as smart as being able to build this stuff. Okay, we're getting the sense from you that Bitcoin Season 2, this very loose term that people are using, is going to take Bitcoin out of its niche. It's going to get us using Bitcoin for all sorts of things. Probably some of them will surprise us in the same way as if you would have gone back to the beginnings of the internet and said, we'll be using it for our food deliveries, we'll be using it for this and that. People wouldn't have been able to necessarily see it. What I'd like you to do to give us that little bit more depth and tell us, what are surprising things that we may be able to do with Bitcoin that will genuinely amaze people? What can we do that is outside of the realm just of digital money?
Well, the use case that I'm most excited about is a very, very basic use case that almost anyone using the traditional finance system will understand, and that's lending. Right now, we have the ability to make payments in a trustless way, meaning without banks, without governments, without third-party intermediaries, but we don't have lending. We don't have the ability to lend against our Bitcoin in a trustless way without third-party intermediaries. And I would argue that that is the second most important and second most used use case in the real world other than making payments themselves. And that is something that will certainly be supported by expanding the scripting language, introducing or activating opcodes like opcat. So that's the one that I'm most excited about.
And what would that actually look like if you were to loan money to Gareth or to somebody else who you don't know at all? What would that look like on Bitcoin? And what would your guarantees be that you're going to get your money back?
There's a lot of different ways that you could potentially architecture that, right? So I think one of the things that's really exciting about this Bitcoin Season 2 space is that you have different builders who are trying to solve these problems in different technical ways. Right now, something called discrete log contracts, DLCs on Bitcoin are supporting this pretty well. I think there's a lot of promise in this area. And what that basically enables is somebody can lock up their Bitcoin essentially whilst holding their own keys. So they retain custody of the Bitcoin or rights to the Bitcoin whilst basically still being able to get it out if they make their payments, right, on their own volition. And then only in the event that they miss a payment back of a particular loan, only then trustlessly and verifiably could a lender take that underlying Bitcoin collateral. That's sort of the thing that I think is actually probably going to end up being like the first real true DeFi use case that we successfully operate. We're pretty much already there, is being able to have folks engage with loans, meaning they put Bitcoin as collateral to get out some kind of loan back. And then only in the event that they don't repay that loan can somebody take that collateral. And that's proven by math rather than trust is the key thing.
So Gareth, give us a final thought on the following, a topic that we love to talk about, which is how crypto can actually shrink the world. You've got somebody who lives in a place with unstable banking, perhaps limited prospects. You have other people who are in more stable countries. How could crypto, the kind of lending dynamic that Isabel has outlined, how could that actually help the person who's living without the stable banking get the kind of money that they need to start a business, to change their family's life? And is that something that you see coming in the next few years?
Yeah, I think the easiest explanation of this is the ability for someone to acquire or receive Bitcoin. You don't need any documentation or anything like that. You simply need an internet connection and a device that allows you to set up a Bitcoin wallet, right? Once you've received some Bitcoin or acquired some Bitcoin over the counter, you can use your Bitcoin however you want, right? You're a part of a peer-to-peer network. If we get to this reality where people can acquire Bitcoin anywhere and everywhere, let's just use a country as an example that is grappling with hyperinflation. I want to hold on to value, so I acquire some Bitcoin. I now have this Bitcoin. I want to buy a house. I have a significant amount of Bitcoin, but I'm not part of the conventional traditional finance system. So I can't go to the bank and ask for a loan. But I have Bitcoin. And if we unlock this DeFi functionality and I can take a loan out against my Bitcoin, let's say, for example, in a stable coin, 1-to-1 backed by the US dollar, I stake my Bitcoin or deposit my Bitcoin. I still control the keys, so I'm technically in control of it. I receive the capital that I need. I can give that to someone else who can deposit it in a bank for me, and I can do the transfer and get the deeds for my house and start, move into my new house and start paying off my loan over time. I haven't had to involve a bank or a third party at any point of this, and I've used a completely peer-to-peer decentralized network and didn't have to ask for permission for anyone. That's the kind of future that we're moving towards, where it gives people ultimate control, and a few little changes to some lines of code might just unlock that for all of us. And that's the kind of future that I'm hopeful about and want to advocate for going forward.
Isabel, a final word of wisdom from you?
Ooh, word of wisdom, I'm not sure about, but other than, I'm a fan of Bitcoin, do with that information what you will. But I would say, I think even in just the trading world, which is, I would say, another kind of core use case for a lot of what's happening in crypto, obviously, there's a lot of interesting ways that we can kind of plug Bitcoin into the trading world in ways that weren't possible maybe a year or two ago. And that's only going to accelerate. So excited about that as well.
Great stuff. So remember to find Isabel with her podcast. Remember to find Gareth every day with his Twitter Spaces. Tell us, both of you, where listeners can find you.
Yeah, I'm at Gaza_Jenks on X. And like Nathan said, you can catch Cointelegraph's daily X show, Chain Reaction. And I'll throw it over to Isabel for her handles.
Thanks. Yeah. So I create almost all of my content on Twitter, crypto Twitter, as they call it. So you can catch me on Twitter at Isabel Foxen Duke, which is my name. And that's where I, primarily publish all of my podcasts and, all crypto, Bitcoin related content. So you can catch me there.
Isabel, you've taken us on a really interesting ride today from your leap from the world of traditional finance into Bitcoin, not just season 1, but season 2. It's really inspiring to see all of this stuff unfolding in front of our faces. So thank you so much for joining us on the Clear Crypto podcast. And to you, our listeners, whether you are just starting your crypto journey or you're a seasoned Bitcoiner, we hope these episodes are proving useful and interesting to you. If they are, remember to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And I would personally really appreciate it if you go onto Twitter, follow me at Nathan on Crypto. That's at Nathan on Crypto via Twitter. Find Gareth, find Isabel, find other interesting people and go further on your crypto adventure. This has been the Clear Crypto podcast, powered by Starkware and Cointelegraph. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.